Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of What's on My Desk. Today I have something that looks to be out of this world, from outer space, and way ahead of its time. Something an alien would come down to Earth with. What are these things? These are tourbillons from Concord, part of their C1 and C1 Lab series. Now you ask yourself a question, Concord, really? I know Concord to be sort of that, B, even C brand that's, not really all that high end and doesn't really fit into the realm of all these luxury watches from AP and Panerai and Rolex and so on and so forth. Well, that's not really true. Concord is a blue-blooded Swiss manufacturer. They've been around since 1908, 110 years. What makes them actually special is when they opened up in Biel, Switzerland back 110 years ago, their whole purpose was to manufacture Swiss watches for the US market, unlike every other brand that manufactured for everyone. So I brought with me the Concord Gravity Tourbillon as well as the Concord C1 Lab Series Tourbillon. Now, I'm not a nuts and bolts guy, you know that, but these two particular pieces, they really do deserve a bit of a close-up in terms of functionality. And before I get into showing you this crazy-ass watch, just a little bit of history on this. Now, again, been around for 110 years. This isn't the first time that Concord decided to make complicated stuff. They've made tourbillons and perpetual calendars back in the 90s. And what they did is these watches were sort of like concept cars at car shows, and they would sell out right there and then at Basel to some private collectors, and then they would never really even make it onto the retail shelf, and they continued selling their Saratogas that traded in the realm of $500 to $15,000 to $3,000 depending on materials that are used. And the special stuff really sold itself out at every single Basel show. So I'm going to go back to 2007. This is when Concord decided to revolutionize watchmaking, to change up their whole concept of watchmaking and come up with something super duper different, something out of this world, and something that really defined watchmaking standards as they were back then. So in 07, they came up with C1. Now, they had regular chronographs, they had diamond pieces, and so on and so forth, but the most complicated watch is this Gravity Tourbillon. Now, why Gravity Tourbillon? I'll show you. You'll notice the tourbillon on this watch is on its side, and therefore it's perpendicular to the ground. If you remember back in 1801 when the tourbillon was created by Breguet, it was made for a pocket watch. So really it kept the time accurate and adjusted the mainspring for the effect that gravity had on the watch when the pocket watch is in its pocket, perpendicular to the ground. Beautiful offset dial at 11 o'clock to show the time, 3-day power reserve, the trust index. The seconds, the way the seconds display is really unique. They're really independent. It seems like they're independent of the watch, and they're actually displayed on top of the tourbillon cage right here, which is really cool. Transparent back, it is a manual wind watch. They made 25 of these, and all of these sold out as they came out at Basel. Another cool feature worth showing, I guess, is the way the winding mechanism works. You have to depress that little button, this thing pops out, and you get this nifty little handle to wind the watch or to set the time if you pop this thing out. Just to go back and correct myself, actually, the 2007, they introduced the C1, but they didn't introduce this one till Basel 2008. This was sort of the piece that was going to take the Concord C1 line to the next level, showing the world that, hey, we're not just going to do chronographs, we're not just going to do date and time, we're going to make something super complicated and define watchmaking. And this is when they introduced this guy. And speaking of defining standards, this is the watch that broke the internet a short 2 years later. This came out in Basel 2009. Now, mind you, between 2007 and 2008, the financial crisis happened. So timing for these guys was a little bit off, to go from $2,000, $3,000 watches to $20,000, $300,000, $400,000 watches from 2008 to 2009 was really, really hard because of the financial crisis. So you had companies like Patek Philippe and Vacheron Constantin suffering. Lo and behold, obviously Concord wasn't really having a good time either. But nevertheless, in 2009, they did come out with the Quantum Gravity Tourbillon C1. And this is the watch that broke the internet. Everybody went crazy about the watch. What is this thing? Why was Concord making these kind of watches? Where does Concord get off making this kind of a watch? Now let me show you what they made. They're staying within the same principles of defined watchmaking. They made this crazy monster. Again, vertical or perpendicular to the ground tourbillon, except this time around, it's actually biaxial. So this thing turns around its axes. So this thing actually works on both axes. And as you know, and as I told you guys before, on this piece, it's a vertical tourbillon defying gravity. However, if I turn the watch this way, the tourbillon is no longer effective. By making the biaxial tourbillon, this watch is effective whether you have it on your wrist and have your hand out this way or your hand down. Pretty clever, isn't it? Now you'll notice that this thing says energy tank, hence that's the power reserve indicator. Well, if I turn the watch sideways, you'll notice that the tank is full. And you'll notice these notches, 1, 2, 3 on the inside of the watch. Guess what? That's what shows the power reserve. Once the power reserve in this watch is down, that tank will slowly but surely empty. Therefore, showing the power reserve not on the dial, but in a vertical display. So this liquid goes up and down. Kind of reminds you of current HIT watches. They show time as well with liquid, but these guys were way ahead of this time with this watch. Again, the same cool concept as far as the winding mechanism is called. This thing pops in and out by depressing the button. You can wind the watch that way. You have the seconds on top, independent seconds, and a really cool way to actually tick away. But the most impressive functionality of this watch outside of the biaxial tourbillon is how this tourbillon is mounted. Now, I've told you guys before the difference between a flying tourbillon versus a regular tourbillon, and all it is that a flying tourbillon is suspended on a cantilevered arm. Well, this thing takes it to a whole new level. Look at how this biaxial tourbillon is suspended. It's suspended what looks like, quote unquote, a suspended bridge. Well, that little arm here is being held up by a slew of miniature wires that actually hold that arm in place and hold that entire contraption in place, therefore suspending this entire biaxial tourbillon by the use of this quote-unquote suspended bridge capability. Pretty nuts. Another cool thing you'll notice about this watch, it has no lugs. And the reason they did it this way is this thing is 48 millimeters. It's a behemoth. And if you're going to add a lug system to this instead of just sort of screwing the strap onto the side of the case like this one, it will actually be humongous and too big to wear. I wore this a little bit ago. Actually wore it on one of the last episodes that I taped. And look, I have a small wrist and I'm able to pull this 48 millimeter watch off just because of the fact that it has no lugs. Unlike the other guy, this isn't made of white gold. It would be way too heavy. It's made of titanium. And I guess the last thing to mention, and this was sort of like Concord's gimmick, they said, you know what? They said time and space. And by space, notice how spatial this watch is. It's not busy, and it looks like the watch is half empty just by the way it's made. It looks like you can literally store stuff in there. But that was the whole concept of giving the watch space, not polluting it with decorations, not polluting it with beautiful dials and extra bridges that are unnecessary and so on and so forth. It was really about defying time and space. And this is what this watch does. Pretty crazy and pretty nutty pieces from Concord. Well, let's talk monies now. And this thing retailed around $400,000. This thing retails for around $480,000 or $500,000. Prices were pretty crazy on them, and they sold, like I said, right away at Basel to a couple of lucky buyers. A resale value? Unfortunately, when you hear the word Concord, and when a watch collector hears the word Concord, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to cringe. They're going to say, Concord? I'm not buying a Concord. I'm not paying that kind of money for a Concord. And who knows? If the financial crisis did not take place in 2008, maybe the Concord C1 line would have been a lot more successful. But now Concord is still around. They're still selling their Saratogas. You can go right on their website and buy their watches right directly from them, from $1,000 to $3,000, or even some of the pieces sell for $10,000 in gold. But they're going to still continue to try and push the boundaries, and once in a blue moon, you're going to see crazy stuff like this from them. I have a feeling it's going to happen within the next couple of years, because right now the watch market is great, and they're going to have the time and the money to put the research and development into making pieces like this. On an innovative scale, I give them an A+. On a look scale, I give them an A+. On functionality, I give them an A+. On a resale value, I'm still going to give them an F. And the reason I'm going to do that is because you can pick these watches up at a quarter of its original price tag. And again, the only reason that's going to happen is because it says the words Concord on the watch and not Audemars Piguet. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed a closer look at these crazy pieces from Concord's C1 collection. Last but not least, I'm going to show you what's on my wrist. And today you'll notice I have a watch on the opposite hand because I'm wearing the PAM 368 Destro, aka Lefty. This is one of the later models of their Lefty stuff. It's an 8-day power reserve. The original one that I actually used to wear back in the day was the PAM 127, which I absolutely loved. This came in a few days ago, and I absolutely loved it, so I had to throw it on my wrist and wear it for a little bit. Let me show you just a quick close-up of it. Now, I'm not a lefty, I'm a righty. These are made for lefties, but a lot of collectors out there prefer these because they don't really make a lot of them, so they become pretty collectible, so they still trade at retail, sometimes over it or close to it, even pre-owned. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of What's on My Desk. I want to thank you for tuning in. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time for more watch reviews and other videos.